Welcome to the program today. My name is Mondo and I am here with Brent Miller Jr. and we have a great program for you today, but we're going to start it off with a trailer for Before the Wrath, so take a look.
As Galileans, we witnessed his first miracle. He warned us that a time of great deception would come. But we must hold on to our faith, that one day he would return to save us from the end of the world.
Most people don't believe that Jesus is coming back. What if there was evidence that proves that this is all real?
Because there were so many people bringing up little bits and pieces of this, I'm thinking, there's got to be a pattern here.
The Bible talks about it as being a mystery, but why does the rapture have to happen? What's the point to it all? A Galilean would have understood that perfectly.
They are the key to everything. I'm just so stunned. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime.
This is the most profound discovery in human history.
From his promise made through wine at the Last Supper, to why the world cannot know the day of his return, we were chosen to preserve the truth until the end of days. So even if we are not spared from death, others can unveil what we knew and believe.
This discovery proves that he is coming back.
So welcome back, and Brent, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, we have a lot of new people who are watching us, and if you are watching, make sure that you take an opportunity to visit our YouTube channel. We're on Rumble. You can download our app. You can go to prophecywatchers.com and see our website. We're a lot of other ways and a lot of more content that we're doing. So with that, we're getting a lot of new audience. And so for those that might not know you, kind of give us, how'd you come to know the Lord and how'd you get involved in producing, major films?
Yeah, well, it's not something I plan to do. As so often in our lives, the Lord has, plans for us that we don't initially see. But I was working for MTV Networks in Manhattan way back in the day. And
like the MTV?
The MTV. Okay. The MTV. I wasn't a Christian. Back then, very young in New York, I was more concerned about success and the things of the world than I was about anything to do with Christ or any kind of thoughts regarding eternal life, which is so synonymous with so many people in the world today. And what changed my life and set me on a new path was the morning of 9/11. I was coming out of the Battery Tunnel and I was heading into Midtown, and I was 2 blocks away from when the first plane hit the Twin Towers. Wow. And that was the first time in my life through various news and articles and just a lot of the sensationalism that exploded out of that, where I'd heard anything about biblical eschatology or even things that were, prediction and not biblical. In the first time in my life where I've heard things about religious conflicts, about Islam and why did they attack us? And so, like so many millions of Americans that didn't understand what was going on, I myself stopped and had to ask the question, well, what is the purpose to all of this? And the first time in my life, I asked, what is the meaning to life? Is there any truth in any of this? Is Bible prophecy real? And it set me on a multi-year journey to study and fully dive my life into apologetics, eschatology, and so many different fields of biblical research. And ultimately, in the end, I was led to the simple conclusion that the Bible is 100% valid, trustworthy, and true. And so in 2010, my wife and I founded Ingenuity Films, which is an apologetics Christian production company. It was founded out in California, and we did our first film, The Final Prophecies, which talks about a lot of the biblical evidence that could lead somebody to understanding how valid and truthful the Bible is. I just want other people to be able to see what the Lord had shown me in the hopes that it would draw them to the Lord as well.
You know, if you haven't seen that film, The Final Prophecies, it's excellent because, especially if you're new to the idea of understanding eschatology, eschatology just means the study of last things, the study of end times, if you want to say it that way. But that particular film was excellent in that it's a great, it has some certainly in-depth to it, in-depth details, but it's a great introduction to the overall idea of what eschatology is. And not only that, but I mean, you think about in terms of the church, that I hear often that, oh, you know, you guys have been talking about Jesus' return for 2,000 years, and that is true. But yet, Jesus gave specific signs of what we would expect, using his words, at the end of the age. And so even himself, even though the last days have, according to biblical terminology, has been the last 2,000 years, there is the end of the age, the end of the last days, or the last days of the last days. And this particular film does a great job of highlighting the various categories and topics. And so that was kind of your first really entry into the film, right, for eschatology?
Yes, it was. We had a small camera crew. Most of it was filmed in Israel.
Okay.
So you actually get to see the sites that Bible prophecy is referring to. And it really was our first jump into filmmaking. And we had no idea this would be, that God's plan is that this would be the first film that would lead into exponential growth for Ingenuity Films, into what is now one of the fastest growing faith-based docudrama production companies in America.
Yeah, I mean, you had Dr. Arnold Fruchterbaum on there, and he's a great Messianic Jewish scholar. And so you had some good people, some good content for sure, very detailed, and I would say, you know, from our perspective, you know, we certainly hold to a pre-tribulation rapture perspective, and premillennial, you know, that Jesus is going to come back before he reigns on earth for 1,000 years. So again, the overall, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to do it because, and maybe you're new, it's such a great, again, something you can share with people as well. I mean, you mentioned apologetics. What does that mean?
Well, laymanly, it's really using evidence to verify a biblical argument, to prove to somebody that it's true, using history and statistics and what one may refer to as just rational deduction. You know, and it's a perfect way to fight fire with the family members and the friends that are either on the fence or just have complete unbelief in the Bible and don't understand why you yourself put your faith into it. So apologetics is something that I feel has completely been marginalized from the church as well. Most churches don't discuss prophecy, you know, or apologetics, and these are powerful tools for proving the validity of the Bible. So that is why our films are based on it, and we find that they are unbelievably effective ministry tools for the lost. In fact, the first two films we produced weren't really for the church. They were for the unbelieving world. The Final Prophecies followed by The Coming Convergence, both about how you can look at prophecy through a rational lens to prove the Bible is true.
Yeah. You know, when you think about apologetics, you know, 1 Peter 3:15, if you're a Christian, we're commanded by Peter. He says, always be ready to give a defense, you know, for those that ask of you for the reason of the hope that we have, with gentleness and respect. So we're commanded to be apologists, not in the sense of making apologies, but we're commanded, right, to have a defense for understanding Scripture. And there's really no greater, I don't think, there's no greater avenue to do that than through prophecy, because in Isaiah 44, I like how God, he kind of baits the other false gods and the other religions to say, hey, let's bring all the religions. I mean, God's saying, bring all the religions of the world, let's sit them down here on a table, and the one true religion is the one that speaks future in advance, because only God can do that. And so he puts it out there as a test. And so for us to come along and to show how God's word the future in advance written. Let's switch over to The Coming Convergence, because that was another great film where you took these topics. What does the word convergence mean, and how did it come together?
Well, the Bible prophesies that at the end of days, we'll be able to know that we're truly near the very end, where redemption is nigh, based on the culmination of so many different things that are happening in the world. And, you know, somebody who was brought to faith largely through prophecy, simply because it does validate the Bible. Our intent was to I guess, set the record straight with so much misunderstanding within the church, which has marginalized prophecy.
Yeah,
they don't
really
teach
has,
it, so
yeah.
of course there's so much misunderstanding. That it's not just one event or this event. There's no super sign, if you will, that one may necessarily see and say, that's the smoking gun where you
Except
know,
Israel, maybe.
It,
but all
well,
the rest of it, yeah.
well, that's a huge smoking gun sign, right?
But all the rest of them, yeah.
The big one that kind of sets so much in motion, which is, you know, what we refer to in the films as well. You're absolutely right. But as far as so many other things, you know, global wars and pestilence and all these various things, so many people look at it out of context or just through that narrow lens. And we're saying the Bible is prophesying that it's not just when you see one or two of these things, it's when you see all of these things. And what we're seeing now in this day and age is a culmination of the convergence of every single prophetic sign happening right now, and that has never existed before in human history.
Yeah, I think that's important because, you know, again, I love apologetics, and, you know, being a pastor for a long time, I've talked about the nature of, there was an era, a period, let's say, well, really from 70 AD when the temple was destroyed, really until Israel became a nation in 1948, that the rapture can happen anytime throughout history. But I always like to ask the question of, you know, the audience is, could Jesus come back today and set up his earthly kingdom? And the answer is no, because all the prophecies have not been fulfilled. And so if you go back to, let's say, 1700 AD, there's no Israel, there's no temple. Right. So you have this gap, is what I call this prophetic gap, where from 70 AD, Israel's dispersed from the land until 1948 when they came back. You have this period of non-signs. But since 1948, now that Israel's back and they're at the point of, you know, as you talked about in the films, getting ready for the temple to be rebuilt, all of a sudden we've been catapulted into this end time framework, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in the film, what we point out is that there are still many alive today that were born and were alive when Israel became a nation once again. So all of this is sort of technically happening in a single generation. And when we look at prophecy, so much of it culminates and comes to fulfillment over the course of thousands of years, hundreds to thousands of years. And we've never seen a time like this before in history where so much is happening at just an increasing exponential rate.
You know, and when we sit here and we're called the Prophecy Watchers, and we invite people like yourselves in the audience, and certainly you participate in what we're doing here because you're watching prophecy as well. And I mean, Jesus made the comment in Mark 13:37. He says, it's a command by our Lord, watch. And to be watching is to watch the signs that he specifically mentioned that we would look for. And again, from 1948 on, you see this capability for us to make these connections. But we're going to take a little break here because one of the other things that we do in trying to educate people and to highlight is our magazine called The Prophecy Watcher. So we're going to take a little moment so that you can see how you can get this.
We have a very special subscription offer for you today. For your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, you can subscribe to either the digital version or the print version of our magazine. And here's the best part. In addition to receiving 12 monthly issues of the magazine, this offer comes with a fantastic bonus: 8 DVDs from some of the leading prophecy experts in the world today. 8 DVDs plus 12 issues of the magazine represents a $200 value, but it's available today for your gift of just $50 or more to support the work of Prophecy Watchers. This offer is available anywhere in the USA and will ship both the magazine and the DVDs absolutely free. Don't wait or hesitate. Call the toll-free number on your screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to take advantage of this limited time offer. Looking at the future through the lens of Bible prophecy is the entire focus of this ministry. We're motivated like never before by our desire to tell the world that Jesus is the only answer for these troubling times. And we do believe that He's coming back very soon, just as He promised. Partner with us today. Help us take God's message of salvation through Jesus Christ to the whole world.
So Brent, we think about whether it's our magazine, we write monthly in it, we got 15,000 subscribers in trying to keep people up to date. We do it through the print or through here, but you're doing it through film, which is awesome. So we've talked about the Final Prophecies, the Convergence movie, and then now the Before the Wrath. Let's talk about that, because that was a tremendous, it had tremendous response from people, and now you have something new coming out. So let's make the connection. What is Before the Wrath?
Yeah, well, Before the Wrath, first of all, I guess let me step back a little bit. With working with different research organizations like Lifeway Research, whom we actually feature the executive director in the film in Before the Wrath, we've discovered that when it comes to the anticipation of the Lord's return, or even the concept of the rapture, that so much of the church is falling away from that belief in an alarming speed and percentages right now. For example, with polling through Lifeway Research and a lot of the other organizations, their numbers are very similar as well. We find that only 36% of the church agrees in the pre-tribulation rapture, which means the majority of the church does not agree with the pre-trib. So the pre-trib's not the majority, which was very surprising. And there's so many different views with mid-trib, post-trib, and so many others as well, that there is a growing division within the church regarding how these things are going to culminate at the end of days. But that's not even the most alarming part. The most alarming thing we came across is that 25% of pastors now no longer believe in the rapture at all. So that's 1 out of 4 Christian pastors in the United States no longer believe in the rapture. And when polling Christian congregations, the majority now no longer believe that Jesus is coming back soon or at all. And so we find that this alarming trend with, it's ironic because it connects to these other films as a foundation so much too, the Final Prophecies and the coming convergence as they lead into Before the Wrath, because we're proving that there's this culmination, this convergence of all these prophetic signs happening now, where there shouldn't be any doubt within the Christian church, the times that we live in, and yet somehow through deception and the marginalization of prophecy in the church, we have fewer Christians than ever before watching and anticipating the Lord's return. Yeah. So Before the Wrath, it essentially, with working with a whole research team in the Middle East, mainly in Israel, we've actually discovered unbelievable first century anthropological evidence, and those that have seen the film concur. It is a life-changing, eye-opening discovery. Whereas we are setting out to actually prove how and why the rapture must occur because of this division in the church. I mean, we actually
talk about the title, because the title connects into the anthropological connections. Before the Wrath, what does that even mean for somebody who's new?
Yeah, well, essentially we know that God's wrath is going to be poured out upon the whole earth. And Christ is absolutely coming back for his bride. We are the bride of Christ. And the film even gets into why we are the bride of Christ. But he is coming back for his bride via the rapture. And so it's simply revealing this new anthropological evidence that proves why God, not necessarily when he's coming back, because that's the division. And there's so many debates out there, so many great books, but no one asks why. Why does God have to come back? Why does something like the rapture even exist within biblical prophecy? It's a very good question, and one that hardly anyone ever asks. So we actually asked that question. Why is the rapture even a thing that has to happen? And what we've discovered in the Middle East is profound evidence that proves why Jesus must come back. It proves why the rapture is real.
Yeah, when you think about, again, we get emails and you hear about it too, but the rapture has surprisingly become a very almost hated and despised doctrine, which is interesting. If you look in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 through 17, you can't, if you're a Christian who believes the Bible, and it's shocking with these pastors, 25%, it's like, I'm not trying to be mean here, but it's in the Bible. The word harpazo is the Greek word, but it comes from the Latin, which is where we get the word rapture. It's this catching away. It's in the Bible. To say that it's not there, it's clearly there. Now again, we have differences of people as it relates to the timing. Is it before the wrath? Is it in the middle of the wrath? Is it before, or at the end of the wrath, or even in the pre-wrath in that sense? But it's surprising that anybody would deny that the truth that Jesus is going to come back and capture his bride away. But this particular movie, you're coming out and you're making a very bold declaration by the title itself, that if we think about the wrath of God as being the 7-year tribulation, which is Revelation 6 or 18 in that sense, you're using the word before. It's a preposition, right? So you're putting yourself out there to say, based on these other discoveries, that it helps provide some background context to understanding that the rapture would be before. Let's talk about that.
Definitely, that absolutely seems to be where the evidence is pointing to. In fact, what we discovered by studying the Galilean wedding culture, and this is where this kind of prophetic timeline was discovered, that this first century evidence, it was through the Galilean wedding customs. And I know it's been around for a long time where they relate the return of Christ to the Jewish wedding customs. But there's always a lot of holes in that theory, a lot of things that were missing. And that's because when Christ was revealing how and why he has to come back to his disciples in Matthew, he was speaking to them not simply as Jews, but actually specifically as Galileans. And this is a key point to remember, is that Jesus wasn't just a Jew as well. He was a Galilean from Galilee, and so were all of his disciples minus Judas. And so he used parables and connected with a broad range of people based on their daily life and what they would understand to explain the way things were in heaven, the shadow of things that exist in heaven. And so it was very easy to understand. So when we look at biblical prophecy, especially when it comes to the rapture and his return and the tribulation period at the end of days, we have this, I guess, this mistake of looking at it through an American lens 2,000 years removed from that first century culture. And even for those that go back and they look at it through that anthropological lens, they do it through a Jewish lens. And you can understand most of it that way. But what we really need to do is focus in on the Galilean lens. And when you do that, everything comes in crystal clear and in focus. And that's what the film reveals. And it is truly life-changing when you see why Jesus told his disciples what he did, about why he has to go away to prepare a place for them, why no one can know the day or hour of his return. It makes so much sense through a Galilean lens. Why only the Father knows, when he'll return. And even when the Galilean wedding began, the wedding feast would last for 7 days, which many contribute to possibly the 7 years of tribulation. So there's just so many dots to connect when looking at it through this lens.
If you haven't seen the movie Before the Wrath, we're going to show you here an opportunity of how to see that, because it was really tremendous. And what I've seen, even in watching the recent discoveries over really the past 20, 30 years, there's a very big distinction in understanding Judaism of the Galilee up like the Sea of Galilee, way north, versus the Judaism of what you would see around the temple in Jerusalem back in the first century. So, these are people that are living out in the country, and they're considered hicks, if you wanted to say it that way. Certainly they were looked down upon by the Jewish elite. But come to find out, with all the synagogues that are in the Galilee, these people are very intelligent, they're very literate in Judaism, they're very devout. When you see Gabriel show up to Mary, where's she living? She's living in the north. She's living in Nazareth, in the Galilee area. And so these were very devout people. So we're going to take a little break here so you can see how you can get all the films that you've been doing.
It's been almost 2,000 years since Jesus left this earth from his favorite place, Jerusalem. The Bible tells us that a cloud took him to heaven in the sight of many witnesses. But before he left us with a promise to return in the same manner in which he left. The next time Jesus returns will occur at the rapture of the church, the first time in history when Jesus gathers all of the people who have put their faith and trust in him alone for their salvation. As you know, we are strong believers in a pre-tribulation rapture. We don't believe that Jesus will leave his bride behind to face his wrath and the tribulation. Revelation 3:10 tells us that we will be kept from the hour of trial that comes upon the whole earth. We believe that day is fast approaching. Enter filmmaker Brent Miller, discussing our favorite subject. Brent's latest film and companion book, Before the Wrath, examines the rapture from a Jewish perspective, specifically the world of a Galilean. Inside the Galilean wedding customs like the obvious shadow of the pre-tribulation rapture. This new look at the timing of the rapture will convince you that Jesus has a plan to remove his church before the tribulation. The Before the Wrath book is available for your gift of $20 or more to support our efforts to take this teaching of the pre-trib rapture to the whole world. The companion DVD can be yours for your gift of $25 or more. Order both the Before the Wrath book and DVD for your gift of $45 or more, and we'll ship them to you for free. Before the Wrath is Brent's third major film. Millions of people have watched The Final Prophecies, perhaps the best film ever made on Bible prophecy. Shot on location in Jerusalem, The Final Prophecies will take you to underground Jerusalem, the Red Sea crossing, and straight into the heart of Israel. He followed this up with an exciting sequel, The Coming Convergence, the story of a young girl who wakes up one day to discover she's missed the rapture and finds herself in the tribulation period. It's quite a wake-up call. All three of these amazing films are available for your gift of $60 or more, with shipping included anywhere in the USA. We've also included a teaching by Gary Stearman, The Rapture is the Resurrection, yours as a free bonus and a thank you for supporting the ministry outreach of Prophecy Watchers. Call the toll-free number on your screen 24/7 and ask for the Bible Prophecy Bonus Package, or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. Thanks for watching today. We're watching too, following the instructions of Jesus to watch for the signs of his appearing as it draws closer. His return is a message of hope and excitement, and the rapture is our reward for those of us who can't wait to spend eternity with our Savior.
So as we come back, we have a few minutes left. Let's talk about really, the film that came out in 2020, again, very well received. But now you have a book. Let's talk about how the book connects with what's been happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Since the film came out, it was the #1 selling Christian docudrama in America in 2020, and since then has released overseas in over 100 theaters, I believe 119 theaters in South Korea. It was recut and redubbed. It's been released in South America, and it's still just spreading all over the world. And I can't emphasize enough how much of a powerful ministry tool this is about why we have our hope that Christ is going to return for us. And those that have seen the film, it doesn't need to be said why it's that powerful tool. But for those that have seen the film, it's a powerful ministry tool to share with your friends and your family. And we urge people to take it to their pastors, show it for free to their congregations. We have been promoting that since the day the film came out, that we want entire congregations just to simply watch the film so they can learn about the love of Christ for us. But we've also had so many overwhelming requests to know more about the Galilean culture and to dive a little deeper into the wedding customs, that one of the anthropological experts that are interviewed in the film, Jay McCarl, actually wrote a book that is the official book to the hit documentary, which dives deeper into some of these Galilean-specific wedding customs, and it's a fascinating read, and that's just became available.
Let's talk about, give maybe one or two examples of the wedding customs. Let's talk about that.
Well, first of all, during the Last Supper, right, you had Jesus, he offered a cup of wine to his disciples, to establish a new covenant with them. And he said, drink from this cup of wine. And I will not drink again from this cup of wine, until I do it again with you in my Father, in the kingdom, in my Father's house. Well, it's very interesting. His disciples clearly understood that this was actually a wedding betrothal taking place, that they were the bride of Christ. And that's because in the Galilean wedding custom, the groom would offer the bride, who surprisingly, despite what a lot of people think, actually had the power to reject a wedding. A lot of people think that the women didn't have any say. They absolutely had the say. They had the ultimate say, because when the groom offered the bride during the betrothal process a cup of wine, she had the choice to take it or reject it. If she rejected the cup, the wedding was off, and that's it. They separate forever. But if she accepted the cup and drank from the cup, then she was accepting the groom. And then the groom would take the cup and drink from the cup, which solidified the betrothal. And even though they were technically married, at that point they would separate for about a year's time, where the groom had to leave and prepare a place.
He'd go back to dad's house, right?
Yeah, exactly, in the father's house. And what's really amazing about the Galilean custom is that it was one of the only areas in Israel where the father would then tell the groom at an unknown time. It was a surprise even to the groom to go get his bride, and it was often in the middle of the night. So the Galileans celebrated a surprise wedding.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too when you think about, Paul in 2 Corinthians 11, he describes, I have betrothed you to Christ. So the language is clearly there. I mean, is the whole chapter about that? No. But when the verbiage, if you piece it together, and that's kind of what you guys have done in the film, is certainly Ephesians 5. We're the bride of Christ there. But you have the betrothal, you have the bride, you have all this language.
Yeah. What's really shocking, I mean, speaking of language, and it's just so uncanny, is that when the groom would actually be told, be woken up in the middle of the night, go get your bride. And he would wake up, they would light the torches, and they would pick up the litter, which is they've discovered in various, digging into various tells in Israel, this bride litter, which is this chair that they lift her up in. You still see that practice today in Jewish weddings. But in the first century, it was for the bride. And they would take the litter in the middle of the night to the bride's house. So she always had to be dressed and ready. I mean, the parallels are uncanny. If she wasn't dressed and ready, well then, there isn't going to be a wedding. This isn't going to happen. So she had to be ready, knowing that the season was close, right, based on the signs of foods coming in, but never actually knowing the day or the actual hour it would happen. But when they would go get the bride, they would put her in the litter and they would actually lift her off the ground so she never had to walk or go to the father's house under her own power. In fact, the first century Galileans referred to it as flying the bride to the groom's house, or to the father's house. And so again, when you see these parallels with what Christ told us about, being occupying, being prepared as a bride, having oil, lighting in our lamps. Why? Because it's nighttime. I'll come for you in the night, like a thief in the night, for those that are unaware. And so there are so many unbelievable parallels between the rapture and Christ's return and the Galilean wedding custom that it's almost undeniable.
Yeah. Well, Brent, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
And, if you haven't seen the film, it's very powerful. It does provide some background. And really, it's like getting a 3D image of some of the truths that are there, and also to see the beauty of having it all put together in one nice, very smooth package. So we appreciate you watching this week. As always, we value your prayers for what we're doing here. We're trying to get the gospel, because we know that prophecy points certainly to the Lord's return. It points to the opportunity for people to come to know that they can have salvation only through Jesus Christ and his death on the cross, and that's what he accomplished for all of us. And so we look forward to his return as the bride, where he is going to fly us away. You can read it in 1 Thessalonians 4. So appreciate you watching this week. Keep watching as we are. See you next time.